All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. Today, we've got an incredible guest on who's going to be challenging us a little bit. It's a guest who I'm extremely excited to talk about because I have a feeling she's going to be opening up some of my scars, some of my wounds, some of my biases, and hopefully giving me a free therapy session here today because Lord knows I need it. Got a specialist here to talk a little bit about anxiety. She is here to talk to us about the body's response to anxiety, what we're supposed to do with it, how we're supposed to approach it, what it really is, and what it isn't. Today, we've got a new friend on the podcast. She might be new to you. She is new to me, and I am extremely excited to welcome Heidi Dennis onto the show. Heidi, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave.
Absolutely. So you're joining us right now. You are in the comfy confines of Arkansas. We're recording this in the middle of summer where it is like an oven there. And I'm looking at you right now. I can attest that your skin is not melting off of your face. You look like you're holding up. The AC, I'm sure, is blasting at max capacity right now. How are you holding up there?
It is cranking. It is good. I'm trying to stay indoors or in the water. Those
There
are my
you go.
two mottos for the summer in
Oh,
Arkansas.
I like that. Indoors and in the water. I love it. All right. Well, so Heidi, introduce yourself to the listeners that might not know you. They know that you're from Arkansas. They know that you are an expert in anxiety, AKA a therapist. So walk us through who you are and a little bit about what brought you here.
Yeah. So I have been a therapist for going on 12 years now. So I've been at it for a minute. My background, I actually grew up in South America. So moved here, was kind of an expat to the Arkansas area, born in Georgia. So I've just been all over the place, but just had grown in just a heart for mental health and just wanting to help others.
So grew up in South America. I know that's a part that stood out with people. South America is a big place.
Yeah.
There are jungles, there are mountains, there are beaches. There are big countries, there are developing nations, there are underdeveloped nations. Unpack that a little bit more. When you say you grew up in South America, were you like Tarzan's friend? Were you living life in Rio? What were you doing in South America?
Yeah. Well, I was living in Quito, Ecuador, so a city of probably about 3 million people. So just a hustle and bustle, lived there for about 6th to 12th grade, and then came to Arkansas for college and have been here ever since.
All right. So the Schmitto bias is going to creep its head in. I'm just going to say it. Why would anybody move to Arkansas? Sorry, the Arkansas listeners.
I asked myself the same question, Dave.
It's from Quito, Ecuador to Arkansas. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think my disclaimer was I'm moving to Arkansas, but it's not what you think.
Okay, so what is it? What is it if it's not what we think? Paint the picture.
Yeah, and Northwest Arkansas is kind of its own unique bubble where, we have the Walmart family dumping a lot of investments into the area. So a lot of cool mountain biking trails and, top of the line restaurants and things like that. And so it's kind of its own little niche where we have tons of people coming in and world-class art museums and all sorts of things. So I'm not out in the field,
Okay. But still, I can imagine there was some culture shock, right? Coming from the big city of Quito to Northwest Arkansas. Did you know what you were getting before you arrived, and started the college journey?
Not particularly. I think my link was my grandparents retired about 4 hours from where my college was. And so I had a little comfort of home since my parents were still living in Ecuador. So that was a nice attachment, nice place to go for the weekend if I needed to be near family. So
well, that's fair. Let me give you the selfish reason I'm asking this. So I've got 4 kids. My oldest is entering his senior year right now, and right now, no idea what's going to happen after his senior year. There's a lot of stress on his end, a lot of stress on my end, and in his world, it's don't talk to me about it. It's not going to happen. And in my mind, you have no idea. The world is about to come raining down on you. We got to figure this out. I have to have it mapped out. And he kind of just shoots from the seat of his pants.
Sure.
And this theme of anxiety is loud and clear in my mind right now, thinking about his future. and whether or not
Mhm.
he's going to end up in Northwest Arkansas, whether or not he's going to end up in a big city, whether or not he's going to be hanging out in his bedroom still. I have no idea. So when you first landed in Northwest Arkansas, were you just, hey, the sky's the limit, I'm going to go out and just figure this out, or were you terrified?
I was terrified, I think, if at first, especially, being away from family for the first time. And I can certainly, appreciate probably the anxiety that you and your son are feeling about college. And it's interesting responding to it in two different ways. You're kind of like, let's get ahead of this, let's plan ahead, let's think this through. And your son is probably experiencing a level of anxiety and saying, let's avoid this. Let's not think about it yet, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So who's right, me or him?
both.
No, 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 no. So I'm gonna play this back for him. So let's
Uh-huh.
rewind, and I'll
Yeah.
ask you again. Nope, you say both. How can we both be right?
I think you're both trying the best way you can to respond to anxiety. So when I say anxiety, all that it is, because I think it's commonly misunderstood, all that anxiety is your nervous system responding to a perceived threat. Sometimes there's an actual threat, sometimes there's not, but your nervous system is just signaling that there's something threatening, there's something overwhelming, there's something uncomfortable, and it's trying to get your body to respond, right?
So it's biological.
It's biological. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And so you're both trying to respond to that in your own way, right? The best way you know how.
So you are, and I'm going to say the word. I don't know if you would say the same thing or not, but you're an expert in anxiety.
Sure.
With that, does that mean you know how to turn it on and off? You're able to say, "Yep, it's not something I need to worry about. It's not something I need to feel anxious about." Flip the switch, and you just keep moving through life.
Not, no, I don't think anybody can just flip the switch like that, because I think that's probably what we most often want to do.
Oh
In
yeah.
fact, every client that comes into my office, they have one goal: make it stop.
Mm-hmm.
Make it stop. How do I flip that switch? Tell me the secret to flipping the switch. And the problem is your nervous system, your anxiety is like your built-in alarm system. And so if you ignore it, if that's your number one goal of ignoring it, or maybe trying to control it, would be kind of what you're doing with your son, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like, how do I control it? How do I get him to XYZ, right? Um, your nervous system's going to be fighting you,
Yeah.
you know, it's going to
So
be fighting you.
no, I hear you. I hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Um, you know, in my world, I tend to like live in the black and white. Things are
Sure.
very binary, and therapists tend to live in the gray, where everything is a little bit true, right?
Sure.
Um, it's interesting. So I'm gonna go back in time 6, 7 years ago when I was meeting with therapists regularly and got put on medication to try to deal with my anxiety.
Sure.
And the solution that was presented to me was to start taking medication that in essence numbed my biological response to anxiety. And I don't want to go Joe Rogan on you right now, right? I don't want to go
Yeah.
to that extreme.
Yeah.
But if it's natural, if it's a
Yeah.
biological process, walk me through the I don't know, the correct correct probably isn't even the right way to say this, but the the Heidi Dennis approach to handling anxiety. Is it something that should be numbed, turned on, turned off, managed, just made aware of? Like how should
Mhm.
we be approaching
Yeah.
anxiety when we start to experience it?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I'm going to answer your question with an analogy.
Okay.
So I want you to imagine you're lying down tonight, go to sleep, and your smoke alarm goes off.
Mm-hmm.
And you try to numb the noise. You try to go back to sleep because you don't like how it sounds. It's annoying, it's screechy, and you're just trying to like cover your ears and make it stop.
Yeah.
So obviously you would never do that. What would you do? You would get out of bed, you would go see if there's a threat.
Yeah.
That's the first step always when it comes to when your nervous system is
Mm.
going off. Is there a threat?
Mm.
Once you determine whether or not there's an actual threat, if there is, you get to safety, right? If there's not, and your nervous system just kind of going off, right? Then you can let it know, hey, there's not a threat, disable the alarm, right? And then once you do that very crucial first step that I think most people miss, they try to jump to the numb, distraction,
Mm-hmm.
control, all of this. If you can do that first, is there a threat? No, there's not a threat. Then your toolbox is wide open,
Yeah.
right? Then you can plan, then you can numb, then you can distract, then you can deep breathe, then you can squeeze the stress ball, whatever it is, you pick your poison, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That you just have to do that first crucial step. If not, you're just going to be fighting yourself every step of the way, right?
So, so this is interesting. You're making me think through a few different components of this. I want to talk about it through the lens of kids and students. I want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about adults as well, because I think we might be processing things a little bit differently based off our age and our experience and maturity.
Mhm.
With kids, and I'm using
Mhm.
this because a lot of people that listen to this podcast are educators and or parents. And depending on when they're listening to this, they might have kids that experience anxiety for a lot of different reasons at school, whether it's social anxiety, maybe the start of a new school year they causes some anxiety. Maybe their students or their kids experience test anxiety. I've
Mhm.
heard people talk about, for example, test anxiety and say test anxiety is not really a thing. You're not really anxious about a test. You're more anxious about the judgment that you perceive might follow the test. Is that
Mhm.
what anxiety really comes down to? It's this fear of unknown. It's the fear of, is there something out there or not? Like you talk about the threat. Is there a boogeyman behind the door? And once you open the door and realize it's there or not, then you can deal with it. Is it really
Yeah.
just fear of unknown?
I think that that's just one example of
Okay.
how anxiety can present itself. And so, in the test situation, maybe the anxiety is, okay, how am I going to perform? Maybe the anxiety is, how are my parents going to respond to me? Right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to yell at me. They're going to be mad at me. Is there like an abusive
Mm-hmm.
situation at home? That might be part of it. Um, Part of it could be, yeah, some performance anxiety, like how well will I do? Um, I mean, I think the list can go on and on about what you're perceiving as the threat. And I think it's different for all of us, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah, go ahead.
no. So with adults right now,
Mhm.
um, it seems like it's in vogue to talk about anxiety, whether it's anxiety at work or in a personal life. It used to be this taboo topic that you weren't supposed to talk about mental health, mental wellness at all. Anxiety seems to be like that gateway drug to the bigger conversation, if you will, because everybody feels anxious about something. I think in part because it's easier for us to externalize things and talk about the big bad threat that may be out there as opposed to having to process things internally. Don't know. Um,
Right.
are you sensing a more normalized conversation around anxiety amongst adults than ever before?
I absolutely am. I think people are a lot more willing to talk about it, a lot more willing to admit to it. Um, but I still see a struggle in people understanding it.
Okay.
So like when people come into my office and they experience anxiety, the thing that breaks my heart the most is they come in with a sense of shame.
Mm,
Like my body is
I'm broken.
betraying me. I'm broken. I'm malfunctioning. I can't seem to make it stop. One of the biggest problems with anxiety, Dave, is that it's not always logical,
Mm,
right? So you can tell yourself, this isn't a scary thing. This isn't a threat. But if your body is still feeling anxious, you can assume that it's malfunctioning, right?
mm-hmm,
Or you can
mm-hmm.
assume that there's something wrong with you that you can't seem to get it together. But one thing I think, another misconception is that once you logically know there's not a threat, you tell your nervous system there's not a threat, you're trying to walk through whatever coping skill that you have in your pocket, it still takes time
Right.
to deregulate, right? It's like if I asked you to run around your house real quick right now and you stopped running and you said, Heidi, why is my heart still racing? Why am I still breathing heavily? I'm not running anymore. Well, because your system needs time to come back down. And so I think if you can learn that it's normal, if you can learn that it takes time to,
Mm,
come back down, suddenly there's a whole lot more self-compassion for
yeah.
yourself when you're dealing with anxiety versus beating yourself up of why do I feel this way when I logically know nothing's wrong.
Yeah, the conversation of linking in logic to this
Mhm.
is fascinating for me on a very personal, selfish level. I tend to
Sure.
be very cerebral, right? I have to look things in the through this logical lens and try to process things using my brain, my mind, research, scholarship. I try to rationalize everything.
Mm.
But sometimes I I cannot rationally find a cause for the anxious feelings. Right?
Mhm.
When I first started going to therapy years ago, I was diagnosed as having depression.
Mhm.
But then it's kind of morphed into having some anxious tendencies as well.
Yeah.
But oftentimes I cannot pinpoint the trigger, right? Because it's not a constant.
Yeah.
I don't always feel the same way. There are highs, there are lows, and there's just going through the motions sometimes. And I'll have people say, explain to me what you're feeling. And sometimes I can't even put it into words.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the trigger, and I have no idea. And that causes more frustration and more anxiety sometimes than even feeling anxious does. And so there is this sense of shame of, I am broken. I can't even figure out what I'm doing wrong. Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Do you tend to sit across from people and provide that reflective lens to help them walk through that? So, and if
Yeah.
so, help me make sense of this myself. How am I
Yeah.
not broken when I can't even figure out what's not working?
That is such a great question, man. It's so hard because nothing can be more frustrating, right? Than I feel this way and I don't even know why.
Yeah.
Right? I can't even put words to it. One of my favorite questions, Dave, in those situations is this a familiar feeling for me?
Mm,
So sometimes our nervous system is super like intuitive. And so sometimes we can feel anxiety, and it's because something has reminded us of something that we experienced before that actually was a threat.
mhm,
So it can be a time of year. Like you'll hear, I read numerous articles about school shooting survivors, right? And when it gets close to that time of year where the event happened, their nervous system starts going, like firing away. And they're not in a threatening situation, but something about that time of year, it can be weather, it can be a smell, it can be a building, it can be anything. All your brain knows is that two things happen at the same time, and it's making a correlation and then firing off your nervous system because it reminds you of something
mm.
hard that you went through before. So when I sit across from somebody, we just kind of ask some of those questions of, this is a familiar feeling? Is this a kind of a typically hard time of year? Is this reminding you of something else? Usually we can kind of hone in on it just with some compassion and curiosity.
And
It
so
still makes sense.
when you're able to find that correlation or the correlation to an event from your past that's making you remember either consciously or unconsciously an experience from the past, right? So for me, it might be a trigger. So we'll just put me on display here. Sorry,
Sure.
world, you're gonna
Yeah,
hear all about Dave Schmidt here.
love it.
Externally, I present myself as an extrovert. It seems like I love to talk to people. I love being on a stage and having 3 or 4 thousand people listen to me. But
Mhm.
put me in a room with 3 or 4 people, invite me to a dinner party where I have to socialize, and I freak out because I don't know what I'm going to say, how I'm going to look, like how to lead a conversation. I'm very good at keeping people at arm's length away and putting forth a facade that I want you to see, but don't get too deep inside of me.
Yeah.
And I can trace that back to, I grew up as a military brat, constantly moving in and out, 16 different schools growing up, and I had to keep people at arm's length because I was either moving or they were moving, and if
Yeah.
somebody gets too close, I'm going to get hurt, right? So
Yeah.
I'm able to see all of that play out, right?
Yeah.
Other people would tell me then the solution to that is, Dave, take yourself and put yourself into uncomfortable situations. Then put yourself into dinner parties, invite yourself out, go socialize with people one on one, and feel uncomfortable so you can realize that nothing bad's going to happen. And my
Yep.
response is no, not going
Yep.
to do it.
Yeah.
Instead, I'll find my safe place and I'm going to live there. I don't
Yeah.
want to feel anxious. I don't want to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, my question to you, do I face the fears, or do
Ooh.
I know that I have the fears and stay away from them?
Ooh, that's a great question. I guess it depends on your end goal. Do you want to grow? Right?
I want to be
Yeah.
happy
I know.
and safe and comfortable.
Same. I love it. I think I think the question is somewhere in their answer is somewhere in the middle.
All right. See, I told you, you live in
Yeah.
the gray.
I
Go ahead.
live in the gray. I live in the gray. I have to. I have to. So I say that because the other purpose of anxiety, other than protecting us, is it lets us know when we need something, right? And
Mm,
so when you're going into an anxious situation, and I love that you brought up that because I can very much, I'm the same way, right? I'm the same way. Like I hate small talk. Oh, I hate small talk, but I will speak, I will dive deep, I will whatever, but man, small talk gets me all
yeah.
itchy. I hate it, hate it. So anyway, if anxiety can teach you about what you need and it can make you aware of your needs, then if you're going into one of those situations and you're aware of this, then you can have resources at your disposal, right? You can go in with somebody that you feel comfortable with, right? As kind of your ally. So kind of anxiety can lead you to connection. You can go in kind of with some extra reassurances for yourself, like some mantras of like, they're probably not thinking you're an idiot, Dave or Heidi
Hmm.
or whatever. Like I have to go through that of like, hey, they're not, they're just people. You know, you don't have to be anxious. So anxiety can let me know I need a little more reassurance. It can
Hmm.
let me know when I need to go home, like, hey, I've hit my limit. I'm out, right? Whatever it is, it can lead you to, I don't know, meeting some needs as well.
So it's almost that gut. When we say we should be led by our gut or led by your spirit, it's almost one of those things that we're equipped with. And by I say
Yeah.
spirit, I don't mean to imply necessarily spirituality, unless that's a belief. If you think those two things are intertwined,
Sure.
but it's something that we've been equipped with, um, to be able to learn how to navigate the world. It's not a flaw that we have. It is
Yeah.
truly a defense mechanism that we've been
Yeah.
equipped with. Hmm.
Absolutely. Defense mechanism, internal alarm system, you know, it's trying to protect us, it's trying to teach us. It's not always logical, it's not always right,
Yeah.
but even when there's not a threat and it's firing off, it can still let us know we need some reassurance, we need some connection, we need some grounding, we need a break.
So
We're
so
overwhelmed, right?
so why do we look at people then in popular culture who seemingly never get nervous? And I don't know, maybe I'm oversimplifying nervousness with anxiety, making those two things synonymous. Maybe they're not. I don't know.
Pretty
But
related.
okay, so why do we look at people then who seemingly don't get nervous and who don't sweat the small stuff as though they're
Mhm.
superheroes and as though they're not broken? Like I think about professional athletes, the NBA finals, these LeBron James or anybody else standing on a free throw line with 50,000 people heckling them and taunting them. They just sit there and act like they can tune it out. And we're like, wow, you're a god. You're
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And we look at students in school and we look at them as though they're broken and we have to try to toughen them up by making them do public presentations and give speeches in front of your peers because this is a skill you're going to have to learn. So get over it now. Like, why do we look at it as though being nervous and anxious is a bad thing? And that
Right.
if you can get past it, you're a superhero. Is that
Yeah.
just a flaw with our society or something that we need to
Yeah.
start to understand better?
Yeah. I think it's really messed up.
Okay, good. Okay.
It's really messed up. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
So how do we combat that?
I think we learn to listen to it. We
Mm.
learn to value it, to
If
appreciate.
only somebody could write a book about this, so they can get it in the hands of millions of people. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah. That actually just wrote a book about this, Dave. Yeah.
You did.
Sure did. I sure did.
So are we going to send this to the media outlets and all the people that are in charge of the social media platforms and try to enlighten them that
Yeah.
they are sending flawed messages to the youth of America?
That's my hope. I'm campaigning this. That's my
Okay.
hope. Get the
So
message out.
so let's
Yeah.
let's let's talk about this book then. I mean,
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit. Give me a little bit of a teaser. What's it called?
Yeah. Well, it's called Hello Anxiety. And I kind of did it as a kind of a double innuendo
Okay.
where you're sometimes it's like, oh, hello anxiety, like,
Stay away.
or
Yeah.
hello anxiety, like, how do I welcome it? But the whole premise is how do I find peace by learning to work with my anxiety
Hmm.
instead of fighting it?
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's good. and I'm intrigued, and from many different reasons, right? So I'm thinking about this book, and I'm thinking about if I had this book and I gave it to somebody else,
Mhm.
is that a gift that I give them and that they perceive of, oh, you see that I'm broken and flawed and I need help? Is it a book that I grab for myself to read because I look at myself as needing help? How can you get a self-help book without realizing that there's something that's flawed, but being anxious isn't a flaw? Like, walk me through the
Yeah.
trigger for when should somebody receive this book, pick up this book, or access this book?
Yeah. I think, you know, my whole hope behind the book is if you can learn to normalize it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so whether it's for yourself or for someone else, hopefully they wouldn't take offense, if it's coming from a kind place, or if somebody's talking to you about, hey, I've been feeling really anxious, it's, hey, I found this great resource. But I tried to make it, each chapter is just kind of short, sweet, to the point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't try to sound, I don't try to be too wordy or whatever. It's just, here's some practical applications. Here's what anxiety is.
Yeah.
Here's some tools. Here's how to listen. Yeah.
Well, and one of the reasons I am extremely excited about this, and first of all, I knew that you wrote the book ahead of time. That was all the lead in for this. But one of the reasons I'm excited about this is, especially thinking about anxiety as a trigger for this. A lot of people that make a decision to go see a therapist take this enormous leap of faith that they're gonna be ripping off their veil. They're gonna be sitting there completely exposed, talking to somebody that they don't know, sharing some of their deepest, darkest secrets, their fears, the things that they haven't really shared with anybody.
Mhm.
And that in and of itself causes a lot of anxiety for people,
Totally.
especially people that are in the process of experiencing some sort of anxiety and feeling anxious about something, to then
Yeah.
say, and a solution is now go sit down on a leather couch and talk to a stranger about all these, like that just seems like such a difficult ask for some people. And that, I think that
Yeah.
that might be a barrier for a lot of people actually finding the help and the support that they need. And so now you've
Yeah.
created this other entry point, if you will, into the conversation, where from the anonymity of Amazon, they can one click it, buy now, have this book delivered to them 3 days later, and they can sit down
Yep.
and read this on their own couch and
Yeah.
hopefully start to uncover that this doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you're flawed, which can then lead to more conversations, right?
Yeah. It's like
Because
you're reading my heart, Dave. Like that's
well, because I don't want
exactly
people,
why I
yeah,
wrote it. Yeah.
right, and I don't want people to think that like this is a silver bullet. You read this book and hey, you're cured. First of all, there's not.
Yes.
It's not something that you're saying you need to be cured from. It's something you need to understand. But it's
Right.
a step towards progress. It's a step
Yes.
towards growth, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So pretend that I come see you in Arkansas,
Mhm.
and we've been talking now for a half hour, 40 minutes now, and you can start to see some of my idiosyncrasies and some of the things that drive me, or some of the things about me that would drive somebody else crazy or nuts. And I sit down on a couch and say, but there are just some things that make me feel anxious, some things that make me feel nervous. And I talk about other people and perceived judgment and failure. And I can literally list for you 50 things that make me feel anxious.
Sure.
What is the game plan for that? Do we have to go through all 50 of those things and try to figure out the root cause of all 50 of those things that make me nervous? Is there one driver that I need to uncover? What is the secret sauce for fixing
Mm.
anxiety?
Yeah. I think what I would probably do instead of diving into all 50 things is looking for the common theme, particularly in how you respond, how you try.
Mm.
I would take a stab that yours might be trying to control, maybe, maybe,
Wow. Wow.
maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah. And so how do you learn how to organize what's in your control and what's not? How do you learn to let go of what's not? Focus in on what you can control, which is one of the chapters in the book is, when control doesn't work, what do you do then?
Well, okay. So give me some advice here. I'm a
All
parent
right.
of four. I'm a parent of
All right.
four. right? I was an educator for a couple of decades. Now I get to work with people all across the country. And you're right, control is a major component of it. Whether it's truly trying to control the situation or just trying to mask some semblance of control, trying to act like there's some sort of order to things, to again keep all of the stuff that I can't control at arm's length away and not even deal with it. So
Sure.
it's not even like I try to understand all that stuff. I just try to circumvent it and bounce around it and come to the
Yeah.
things that I can control.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, if that's my defense mechanism, is there any harm in that?
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to control.
Ooh,
And
or who
so,
I'm trying to control,
or
right?
who, that's
Yeah.
a great point. That's a great point. And so really when you narrow it down and you think about kind of your circle of control and what's in your circle of control, the only two things that are within your control are your choices and your reactions.
Mm,
That's it. You can't control the future. You can't control the past. You can't control your kids. You can respond to them to help them make different choices themselves, but you cannot pin them down and make them do something without some fight back because
mm.
they have their own circles of control and their own choices and their own reactions. So, yeah. So
Okay. Whew.
here's the kicker, Dave. Anytime you try to control something that's outside of your control, anytime you try to pull something into your circle of control that doesn't belong there, no matter what it is, you are going to experience anxiety every single time.
And so what you have just unpacked for me is why we have a generation of kids on social media experiencing increases of anxiety,
Mhm.
because it's not, social media for a lot of kids is not about connecting. It's about trying to control their narrative. It's trying to
Yes.
control perceptions. And when
Yeah.
they start to realize that they actually can't control the algorithm, they can't control whether or not they're getting likes and hearts and cool emojis, it's causing more anxiety and causing them to try to regain more control, which they can't get, and just leads down to a spiral.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the solution then is burn all cell phones,
Totally.
and all
Yeah.
social media, right?
Yeah. Let's just live off the grid, man.
Let's just move to Northwest Arkansas and do it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. We're moving to the cow pasture. It's cool.
So I mean, but seriously though, is that the solution? Do we just need to remove all of those possible triggers? Um, because how do we get kids, especially
Mhm.
teenagers, to understand this idea of control and choice? And I mean, that's deep stuff for a guy in his mid 40s to understand, let alone a
Totally.
kid.
Totally. I think you just have to help them learn how to organize what's in and what's out, what's in your control and what's out of your control. So
Mm,
if you have your choices and your reactions are your only two things that you can control, like 100% control, then part of that is, if you don't get the likes you want, how do you control your reaction to that? What do you do with that? How do you control, what is that signal that you need, right? Um, so if you can kind of focus in on that, um, it really does bring a lot of relief.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm feeling more anxious right now just thinking about giving up control. Like
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
is this one of those things you get worse before you get better? Because truly,
Yeah.
I'm feeling tension in my back right now. Like
Oh,
I'm
totally.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's for me when I first started practicing, it was like a game of hot potato where I would like feel anxious. Okay, what's in my circle that's not supposed to be? Okay, nope, that's out of my control. I release that. And then 5 minutes later, why do I feel anxious? Oh, I did it again. But there is, not to nerd out on you too much, Dave, but there is a scientific reason for this. Our brains are made up of neural pathways,
Hmm.
right? Which is basically when I feel this, then I do that. When I feel this, then I do that. When I feel this, then I do that. And it just keeps digging in that groove, kind of like water running down a hill. It finds the path of least resistance and digs in that groove, right?
Mm,
So to change a neural pathway, you have to intentionally kind of push past that resistance of I do that and I do this instead. When I feel this, I do this instead. When I feel this, I do this instead. And if you do that on repeat, and again, it takes some fight because it's going to
mhm.
want to flow that same way it's always flowed, right? Through repetition, research says that it only takes about 15 minutes total to rebuild a new neural pathway.
Wow.
Yeah, which just means this time takes a few seconds to try something different. The next time takes a few more seconds. And over the course of time, once that adds up to about 15 minutes, you have a new neural pathway dug in, which is pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
That's crazy. I love learning neuroscience. So don't ever apologize for geeking out like
Yeah.
that, because
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. There's a
And it's
little bit of
so
that in the book too. Like it. Yeah.
well, and it's refreshing. Again, it goes back to reinforce the biological impacts of this. I mean, even our emotions are biological. They're a result of hormones and all kinds of things flowing through our bodies that our mind is trying to process in unique and novel ways, which is the beauty of the human experience, right? So anxiety in and of itself is just a label that we have put on top of this biological phenomenon to try to make sense of our reaction.
You get it, Dave.
This is
You
this
get
thing that's
it.
been going on for thousands of years within us. So
Yeah. You
it's not
get it.
okay. So I'm cured now. I am now an expert
Ooh,
on anxiety. I well actually I could have told you a long time ago I'm an expert on anxiety. I feel it in a very real way all
yeah.
the time. So
Y'all do. Yeah.
and so I can imagine other people that are listening to this right now are both feeling relieved to know that they're not alone in this, relieved to know that there are some solutions out there and some ways to become aware of this. They can pick up your book, they can connect with you, so on and so forth. But there are probably some other people that are now even feeling more anxiety because something has been triggered in them that they now feel like, okay, now I need to go fix this. Like me, right? Those people that
Right.
their solution is to control, to understand, to make meaning of it. So
Yeah.
if you had the opportunity to speak to the world, so this
Yeah.
podcast has a reach, but we're not quite at the 7 billion mark yet. But I
Yeah.
want you to imagine that you are speaking to the world and that you've got everybody in front of you and they're
Mhm.
listening to every word you say and they're on the edge of their seat, but they also know that you're just about to wrap up. You're just about to leave and then drop that mic and walk off the stage. And that's causing them to say, don't stop yet. I'm not cured yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you had the opportunity to leave a mic drop moment with them, the thing that you want them to hold on to above and beyond anything else, it would be what?
I would want the world to know that you're not broken. There's your anxiety, your body is not malfunctioning when you experience anxiety. And if you can learn to listen to it, appreciate it, and learn how to respond to it, whether that's leading you to new coping skills or how to decrease control, whatever that is, or it's leading you to, hey, maybe I need to pursue therapy. Maybe this runs a little deeper than responding to it in some of the ways we talked about today. That just let it teach you. Anxiety is a beautiful teacher.
Mm,
And just let it teach you and lead you where you're supposed to go.
man, that's so powerful. Number one, that it's a beautiful teacher. It's
Mhm.
not your enemy. It's a
Yeah.
teacher.
Yeah.
That is good. I'm holding on to that. And the fact that you just told me I'm not broken, I need to hear that too. So
I
I
love it. We
appreciate
all
that.
do.
I
We all
appreciate
do.
that. So Heidi, if people are looking for your book, I know they can find it on Amazon. They can find it on your website, which I'm going to have linked in the show notes for all those people that actually go the extra mile and click on the show notes. So they'll be able to find it there. Where can people connect with you to learn more about you, your story, and
Yeah.
all the things that you're up to?
Yeah. Well, I have an Instagram account. It's at Heidi Dennis LPC. So you can follow me there. You'll have the link to my website on there as well. Um, yeah, so I think those would probably be the two main ways to reach me.
All right, love it. So find her on Instagram, check out her website, and then you're going to go order her book. So those are your
Yes,
three
please.
calls to action for today. If you're
Yes.
looking for your next steps, what do you need to do to help tackle anxiety, to wrap your arms around anxiety, to embrace anxiety, not to shove it away, but to
Yep.
understand it more so that you can understand yourself more? Go do those three things, grow yourself, help stand beside others. Don't control them, stand beside them and help them uncover this as well. Heidi, you're absolutely incredible. I appreciate you finding the time to connect with all the listeners and especially for helping me. It's been
Absolutely.
incredible.
I love it. My pleasure. It's been great.